Chapter 3 of Patricia, Brent, Spinster. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Anna Simon. Patricia, Brent, Spinster, by Herbert Jenkins. Chapter 3. The Adventure at the Quadrant Grill Room. That evening, as Patricia looked in at the lounge on the way to her room, she found it unusually crowded. On a normal day her appearance would scarcely have been noticed, but this evening it was the signal for a sudden cessation in the buzz of conversation, and all eyes were upon her. For a moment she stood in the doorway, and then, with a nod and a smile, she turned and proceeded upstairs, conscious of the whispering that broke out as soon as her back was turned. As she stood before the mirror, wondering what she should wear for the night's adventure, she recalled a remark of Miss Wangle's that no really nice-minded woman ever dressed in black and white unless she had some ulterior motive. Upon the subject of sex attraction, Miss Wangle posed as an authority, and hinted darkly at things that thrilled Miss Sikkum to ecstatic giggles, and Mrs. Musgrove Smythe to pianissimo moans of anguish that such things could be. With great deliberation, Patricia selected a black charmeuse costume that Miss Wangle had already confided to the whole of Galvin House was at least 2½ inches too short. But as Patricia had explained to Mrs. Hamilton, if you possess exquisitely fitting patent boots that come high up the leg, it's a sin for the skirt to be too long. She selected a black velvet hat with a large white water lily on the upper brim. "You look bad enough for a vicar's daughter," she said, surveying herself in the glass as she fastened a bunch of red carnations in her belt. "White at the wrists and on the head? Yes, it looks most improper. I wonder what the major man will think." Swift movements, deft touches, earnest scrutiny followed one another. Patricia was an artist in dress. Finally, when her gold wristlet watch had been fastened over a white glove, she subjected herself to a final and exhaustive examination. "Now, Patricia," it had become with her a habit to address her reflection in the mirror, "shall we carry an umbrella, or shall we not?" For a few moments she regarded herself quizzically, then finally announced, "No, we will not. An umbrella suggests a bus, or the tube, and when a girl goes out with a major in the British Army, she goes in a taxi. No, we will not carry an umbrella." She still lingered in front of the mirror, looking at herself with obvious approval. "Yes, Patricia, you're looking quite nice. Your eyes are violeter, your hair more sunsety, and your lips redder than usual. And yes, your face generally looks happier." When she entered the lounge it was 20 minutes to 8, and, although dinner was at 7:30, the room was full. Everybody stared at her as with flushed cheeks she walked to the centre of the room. Then, suddenly turning to Miss Wangle, she said, "Do you think I shall do, Miss Wangle, or do I look too wicked for a major?" Miss Wangle merely stared. Mrs. Hamilton smiled, and Mrs. Musgrove Smythe looked sympathetically at Miss Wangle. Mr. Bolton laughed. "I wish I was a major, Miss Brent," he remarked, at which Patricia turned to him and made an elaborate curtsy. "That girl will come to a bad end," remarked Miss Wangle with conviction to Mrs. Musgrove Smythe, as with a smile over her shoulder Patricia made a dramatic exit. She had noticed, however, that Miss Wangle and Mrs. Musgrove Smythe were in hats and jackets. They too were apparently going out, although she had not heard them tell Mrs. Craske Morton so. Mr. Bolton also had his hat in his hand. During the day Patricia had thought out very carefully the part she had set herself to play. If she were going to meet her fiancé back from the front, she must appear radiantly happy, vide conventional opinion, but she had admonished her reflection in the mirror, "You mustn't overdo it. Women, especially tabbies, are very acute." It had been Patricia's intention to go by bus, but at the entrance of the lounge she saw Gustave, who ingratiatingly inquired, "Taxi, miss?" With a smile she nodded her head, and Gustave disappeared. "There goes another 2 shillings. Oh, bother, Major Brown. Soldiers are costly luxuries," she muttered under her breath. A moment after Gustave reappeared with the intimation that the taxi was at the door. A group of her fellow guests gathered in the hall to see her off. Patricia thought their attitude more appropriate to a wedding than the fact that one of their fellow boarders was going out to dinner. It is clear, she thought, that Patricia Brent, man catcher, is a much more important person than is Patricia Brent, inveterate spinster. She noticed that there was a second taxi at the door, and while her own driver was winding up his machine, which took some little time, the other taxi got off in front. She had seen get into it Miss Wangle, Mrs. Mosscrop Smythe, and Mr. Bolton. As the taxi sped eastward, Patricia began to speculate as to what she really intended doing. She had no appointment, she was in a taxi which would cost her 2 shillings at least, and she had given the address of the Quadrant grill room. She was still considering what she should do when the taxi drew up. Fate and the taxi driver had decided the matter between them, and Patricia determined to go through with it, and disappoint neither. Having paid the man and tipped him handsomely, she descended the stairs to the grill room. She had no idea of what it cost to dine at the Quadrant, but remembered with a comfortable feeling that she had some £2 upon her. With moderation, she decided, it might be possible to get a meal for that sum without attracting the adverse criticism of the staff. It had not struck her that it might appear strange for a girl to dine alone at such a restaurant as the Quadrant, and that she was laying herself open to criticism. She was too excited at this new adventure into which she had been precipitated for careful reasoning. As she descended the stairs, she caught a glimpse of herself in a mirror. She started. Surely that could not be Patricia Brent, secretary to a rising politician, that stylish-looking girl in black, with a large bunch of carnations. That red-haired creature with sparkling eyes and a collar that seemed to have caught the reflection of the carnations in her belt. She entered the lounge at the foot of the stairs with increased confidence, and she was conscious that several men turned to look at her with interest. Then, suddenly, the bottom fell out of her world. There, standing in the vestibule, were Miss Wangle, Mrs. Mosscrop Smythe, and Mr. Bolton. In a flash she saw it all. They had come to spy upon her. They would find her out, and the whole humiliating story would probably have to be told. Thoughts seemed to spurt through her mind. What was she to do? It was too late to retreat. Miss Wangle had already fixed her with a stony stare through her lorgnettes, which she carried only on special occasions. Patricia was conscious of bowing and smiling sweetly. Some subconscious power seemed to take possession of her. Still wondering what she should do, she found herself walking head in the air and perfectly composed in the direction of the grill room. She was conscious of being followed by Miss Wangle and her party. As Patricia rounded the glass screen, a superintendent came up and inquired if she had a table. She heard a voice that seemed like and yet unlike her own answer, "Yes, thank you," and she passed on looking from right to left as if in search of someone, unconscious of the many glances cast in her direction. When about half-way up the long room, just past the bandstand, the terrible thought came to her of a possible humiliating retreat. What was she to do? Why was she there? What were her plans? She looked about her, hoping that she did not appear so frightened as she felt. She was conscious of the gaze of a man seated at a table a few yards off. He was fair and in khaki. That was all she knew. Yes, he was looking at her intently. "No, that table won't do. It's too near to the band." It was Miss Wangle's voice behind her. Without a moment's hesitation, her subconscious self once more took possession of Patricia, and she marched straight up to the fair-haired man in khaki, and in a voice loud enough for Miss Wangle and her party to hear, cried, "Hullo! So here you are! I thought I should never find you." Then, as he rose, she murmured under her breath, "Please play up to me. I'm in an awful hole. I'll explain presently." Without a moment's hesitation, the man replied, "You're very late. I waited for you a long time outside, then I gave you up." With a look of gratitude and a sigh of content, Patricia sank down into the chair a waiter had placed for her. If there had been no chair, she would have fallen to the floor, her legs refusing further to support her body. She was trembling all over. Miss Wangle had selected the next table. Patricia was conscious of hoping that somewhere in the next world Miss Wangle's sufferings would transcend those of Dives as 100 to 1. As she was pulling off her gloves, her companion held a low-toned colloquy with the waiter. She stole a glance at him. What must he be thinking? How had he classified her? Her heart was pounding against her ribs as if determined to burst through. Suddenly she remembered that the others were watching, and, leaning upon the table, she said, "Please pretend to be very pleased to see me. We must talk a lot. You know,